Good morning. This week we're going to continue covering our material with respect to input and output streams using file system, and also covering the issues related to the next homework. So this is our latest posting here. I'm going to jump to this week's material here, and so roughly this is week 11, but there's still some material left to talk about with respect to the topics on this list. Anyways, I hope you're reading the textbook alongside with our presentations. Everything is being posted on YouTube up to date, and we'll keep the same routine. Okay, next thing that I'd like to talk about is I just loaded the program that we tried to use last week. And if you recall, we made an example of the date structure. And this is somewhat similar to what's being in the chapter of the book. And it's a structure that contains the 3 integers. And we introduced the use of operators, which can be used to connect the structure in a seamless way with the stream library, stream objects of C++ library. Like, for example, over here, we intend to use a standard input operator to enter 3 integers for the date, and we allow the user to use / to separate the calendar pieces of the input. Now, we also use, obviously, if everything goes well, we also just use the standard output operators, which means formatted output for our data structure. But there's a little bit of a technicality that I wanted to cover with respect to this. By the way, this is being posted on the on the samples page for the course, and this is also, I've updated this latest version, made it part of the presentation that we were using last week. But now, what happens if I change a keyword struct to class? Meaning of this change is that everything becomes private. Okay, and so this is, of course, by default within the class. If we kept it the way it was originally, it means that everything is public. That these pieces, these integers are actually available outside of the structure. And for example, like this, when we define our output operator right here, we go directly to the structure and say, okay, what is your month, what is your day, and what is your year? So then if we change this back to class, as I suggested, then everything becomes private, and by default, everything is private. I try to rebuild this solution within Microsoft Visual Studio here, and you see I'm getting lots of errors. My usual approach is to, of course, scroll all the way up to the first error that I have here, and just double click on this line, the first line, and what it says here, not a surprise by the way, it says cannot access private member declared in class date. So apparently I have, and it actually points me right to where this error is occurring. So right around this month. So I look this up, here's my month, and within the class it's private. So basically the rules of encapsulation, which is one of the principles of object-oriented programming, is that you cannot access private of a class, being that a data member or member function, doesn't matter, you cannot do this. So then what could be the solution? One potential solution could be to add public function which returns an integer, and it would be something like this: get month, right? Get the month, and it doesn't take any parameters, and it could be defined as simply returning a month. So this would allow us to get to provide access to the month variable right here within the date. And instead of saying month right here, just say get month. Okay, so something like this. This will work. And the same we would have to do with day, month, day, and year, and so forth, right? So we could do this, right? We can say it doesn't take very long. Good day, get the year, right? And correspondingly return year and day to satisfy this type of implementation, and then use get day and get month and get year as as a possibility, right? So this would eliminate the problem from attempt by this operator function to like overloaded operator, which would otherwise attempt to access private data members. If I try building it, of course, I will have still a lot of problems because I still have many places like this. Oh, actually, what is it? Can I convert this pointer from? Yeah, oh, this is a very, very good error that I'm getting actually. It's very helpful because I'm declaring that my access to the date construct or structure this time is being changed to a class. We promise that we're going to use it in a constant manner, otherwise not attempting to make any changes even by mistake. So it means that when we try to access a function that says get month or day, year, the compiler doesn't know whether that function is going to change the content of the date in any way. To allow all of this compile properly, we need to requalify our function as being const, and this is done after the list of parameters like this. And so this tells the compiler that there's no intention within these functions to modify this, or this. So we just save this and build again. Hopefully this will be fine. And so now we continue to have a bit of an issue here and there, and so we will fix things a little bit later on. In fact, let's actually maybe fix it now. Basically, now that I'm using the structure initializer list like this for month, day, and year, whereas month, day, and year over here are integers, it just says that you can no longer do this initialization because these things are private, and you should not be once again accessing this set of variables directly. So I need to add a constructor. Yeah. Date, and I'd have to say in a month, in day, and in year, right? And provide create a constructor that takes these parameters and define it as using initializer list syntax. If you remember, is basically initialize month with the parameter provided by the constructor. The day also the same way. This is the initialization list, and year like this. Okay, and then the rest of the constructor, the body does really nothing. So it's just basically using initializer list. okay, to populate data members. So if I add this constructor with this initializer list, this is here is what it's called, initializer list. It's using constructor syntax for taking this input variable and using it to populate this data member, which is this. Okay, so this data member is this, and this constructor parameter is this within the parentheses. So that's according to the C++ syntax for initialized. This is typically how you would use a lot of values provided on the, to the constructor to use them to populate the values correspondingly within the class itself. Okay, so we have this constructor. And now this should be possible to build this. And we still have the issue with the default constructor now, because the issue is related to the fact that once a specific constructor is specified, the default constructor is taken away. Constructor removes the default constructor if the default constructor is gone. So we can just add the default constructor here like this and use the same initializer list. I would actually prefer what we did last week. I believe we had, or a couple of weeks ago, to initialize it with today's date. But today, just to just move forward, I just populate this these data members with zeros. Okay, so this would be my default constructor. This is the default constructor. Constructor. Right, and this is a specific constructor. Like this, specific constructor. Okay, both are using initializer list actually. We can move this comment right here and say both constructors using initializer list, and these are the two constructors that we added here. So this whole set of issues that we're trying to address is just simply because we're changing struct to a class, which restricts access to these data members, and we try to work around this issue by basically adding constructors and providing public access operations. I'll just say that these are my operations over here. Sometimes just a simple operation like the operation just simply returns the value from the content of the data structure here would be called, these three would be called getters. There could be getters and setters that would be added to the class that are very simple functions which would take the value and store it, or take the value and return it from a function. Okay, so let's build again and just see what else we need to address step by step. So now this builds fine. Okay, so these are the changes that were taking place. So we took we started using getter functions to access the values because these data members no longer public, and also to satisfy the need for constructing these objects. We added default constructor for this part, and we added specific constructor for this part. So everything is okay so far. But there is this technicality that sometimes if you want to allow this to, so this solve the problem right here, right? So we have, this is where it all started, that we just started to observe that this was no longer possible to do directly with data members, and we had to go to public operations because everything below this label now becomes public. So this is all public. right here in this section of the class. And this, by default, everything here is private. So anyway, so that took care of the initial problem.